Right now, somewhere in the world, a doctor is prescribing antidepressants to a patient whose brain is functioning perfectly. Not broken, not defective, working exactly as designed. Just designed for a world that no longer exists. Depression isn't a malfunction. It's a signal. And for 300,000 years, your ancestors never had to receive it. Here's why. We are living through the most medicated period in human history. 1 in 5 adults in the United States is currently taking a psychiatric drug. Antidepressant prescriptions have increased by over 400% in the last 30 years, and the numbers keep climbing. Every generation more depressed than the last. Every solution creating a new problem. And through all of it, nobody stops to ask the obvious question. If depression is just a brain malfunction, why didn't it exist for most of human history? The answer starts somewhere you wouldn't expect, with a researcher and a question that almost nobody thought to ask. In the 1970s, anthropologist Edward Schieffelin spent years living with the Kaluli people of Papua New Guinea. He was studying their culture, their rituals, their language. But what he noticed, almost by accident, changed how a small group of scientists think about mental illness entirely. In a community of several hundred people, living without electricity, without running water, without any of the infrastructure we consider basic, he found almost no depression. Not low rates, almost none. He documented it carefully because he couldn't believe it either. Medical anthropologist Arthur Kleinman found the same pattern in rural China. Different continent, different culture, different language, different food, different everything. Same result. The specific pattern of emptiness, hopelessness, and loss of meaning that defines modern depression was almost nowhere to be found. And here's what makes that impossible to ignore. This wasn't a coincidence isolated to 2 researchers. Scientist Jane Murphy found the same thing studying isolated communities in rural Nigeria and in Inuit populations in Alaska. Same species, same brain. Completely different outcome. So the question isn't what's wrong with depressed people. The question is what's wrong with the world they're living in. To understand that, you have to go back. Way back. Picture a morning 50,000 years ago. The fire from last night is still breathing. Just barely. Someone adds wood before the cold sets in. You open your eyes and the first thing you see isn't a ceiling. It's the same faces you've seen every morning of your entire life. The people who were there when you were born, the people who will carry you when you're gone. You stretch, and without thinking about it, you already know who you are. Not because you've spent years figuring yourself out. Because the group around you has always known. You have a role. You are the one who tracks animals or tends the fire or knows which plants close a wound. Your identity isn't something you perform for strangers on a screen. It's something you live every single day in front of people who depend on you for their survival and you depend on for yours. Your day has a shape, not a schedule, a rhythm. You move your body for hours. You solve problems with your hands. You eat food you helped find. The work is hard, but it ends. There is no inbox. There is no backlog. When the problem is solved, it's solved. And when the sun goes down, you sit with your people around a fire and you talk. Not about whether your life is meaningful. Not about whether you're falling behind. About the hunt. About the children. About the strange thing that happened at the river yesterday. Your belonging is not something you have to earn. It just is. It has always been. You were born inside it. This is the environment your brain was built for, and your brain hasn't changed since. Here's what evolutionary psychologists call the mismatch theory. Depression, anxiety, chronic stress. These aren't diseases in the traditional sense. They're adaptations that made perfect sense in one environment, running loose in an environment they were never designed for. Psychiatrist Randolph Nesse spent decades developing this framework. His argument is simple. Low mood evolved as a signal. It told your ancestors to stop, reassess, change course. In a world where problems were immediate and solvable, find food, fix the shelter, repair the relationship, that signal worked. You felt low, you identified the problem, you fixed it, the signal switched off. But here's where it breaks. What happens when the signal fires in a world where the problems aren't solvable by doing something? What happens when the problem is your identity, your purpose, your creeping sense that the life you're living doesn't belong to you? The signal fires, and fires, and fires, and nothing switches it off. Because there is no action that fixes the modern condition in an afternoon. That's not a broken brain. That's a perfectly functional warning system with nowhere to point. There's more. Neuroscientist John Ratey spent years studying the relationship between physical movement and mental health. His finding was not subtle. The human brain requires vigorous physical movement to regulate mood. Not as a bonus, as a baseline requirement. For 300,000 years, your ancestors moved their bodies for hours every day. Tracking, carrying, building, walking. The brain evolved to expect that input. It uses movement to produce the neurochemicals that make life feel livable. Take the movement away and the system starts to fail. Today, the average American sits for 11 hours a day. The brain is running on empty and calling it depression. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying human social bonds. His research showed that humans are built for deep, stable, face-to-face relationships with a consistent group of roughly 150 people. People who know your history. People who would notice if you disappeared. For most of human history, you never left that group. They were your entire world, and you were theirs. Today, the average person moves 7 times in their life, changes jobs every 4 years, maintains hundreds of shallow digital connections and almost no deep ones. The brain registers this as a slow emergency, because for 300,000 years, losing your group meant dying. We didn't get depressed because we have hard lives. Ancient humans had objectively harder lives, cold, dangerous, uncertain, but hardship alone doesn't cause depression. Meaningless hardship does. Invisible hardship does. Hardship you face completely alone does. And that's the only kind modernity seems to reliably produce. Here's the part that's hard to sit with. Every solution we've invented for depression tries to change the brain, adjust the chemistry, reframe the thoughts, manage the symptoms. And sometimes that helps. Sometimes people need that bridge. But almost nothing we've built tries to change the world the brain is trapped in. Nobody is prescribing community. Nobody is prescribing purpose. Nobody is prescribing 2 hours outside moving your body every single day with people who know your name. Because those things are hard to sell. Your ancestors didn't have better brains than you. They didn't have stronger willpower or better attitudes. They just lived in a world that their brains were designed for. A world with movement and belonging and purpose and the kind of problems you could actually solve with your hands before the sun went down. They woke up every morning already embedded in something larger than themselves, already needed, already known. You have every comfort they never dreamed of, and you're miserable in ways they never were. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's a brain sending a signal it was built to send, telling you that something about the life you're living doesn't match the life you were built for. The question isn't how to silence the signal. The question is whether you're willing to listen to what it's actually saying,